The morning sun cast long shadows across the private airfield just outside London. Tom Parker Bowles stepped out of his sleek black car, his designer sunglasses reflecting the gleaming white aircraft waiting on the tarmac. He adjusted his jacket and grabbed his leather weekend bag from the trunk. The food critic and son of Queen Camilla had made this journey dozens of times before, flying to culinary events and restaurant openings across Europe. Today should have been no different. As Tom approached the aircraft stairs, he noticed something unusual. Two royal guards in their distinctive uniforms stood at attention near the entrance to the plane. Their faces were stern, their posture rigid. Behind them, a senior security officer held a tablet and seemed to be checking something against a list. Tom felt a flutter of confusion in his chest. In all his years of travel, he had never encountered such a reception at a private airfield. "Good morning, gentlemen," Tom said cheerfully, trying to mask his unease. "Is there some kind of security drill happening today?" The taller guard stepped forward, his expression unchanged. "Mr. Parker Bowles, we need to conduct a routine security inspection of your aircraft and luggage before departure." "Royal protocol?" Tom raised his eyebrows. "Royal protocol? I've been flying private for years and this has never happened before." "What's going on?" The security officer with the tablet approached. "Sir, we have orders directly from the Palace Security Division. There have been concerns raised about unauthorized items being transported on private aircraft, associated with royal family members. It's just a precaution." Something about the officer's tone suggested this was anything but routine. Tom noticed how the man's eyes kept darting to his weekend bag, as if expecting it to reveal its contents through sheer force of will. The wealthy food critic had nothing to hide, but the sudden scrutiny made him feel like a criminal. "Fine," Tom said, setting his bag down on the tarmac. "Do what you need to do, but I have a television appearance in Paris this afternoon, and I can't be late." The guards moved with practiced efficiency, one heading up the aircraft stairs while the other began carefully examining Tom's luggage. The security officer stood nearby, making notes on his tablet. Tom crossed his arms and watched, his mind racing. Why now? Why him? He wasn't even a working royal. He had deliberately kept his distance from official palace duties, preferring to build his own career in food and television. Inside the aircraft, the other guard was methodically checking every compartment, every seat pocket, every storage area. The pilot and co-pilot stood awkwardly to the side, clearly uncomfortable with the invasion but powerless to stop it. Through the aircraft windows, Tom could see the guard pulling out cushions, opening overhead bins, even checking beneath the carpeting in certain sections. "This is absolutely ridiculous," Tom muttered under his breath. "What do they think I'm smuggling? Illegal truffles?" The guard examining his weekend bag had laid out every item on a portable table. Toiletries, a change of clothes, his laptop, phone charger, a few cooking magazines, and a sealed envelope containing what looked like documents. The guard's hand hovered over the envelope. "What's in here, sir?" Tom glanced at it. "Just some paperwork for a restaurant investment I'm considering. Contracts and financial projections. Nothing exciting." The guard carefully opened the envelope and began reviewing the papers inside. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the documents. He held one up to the light, examining it closely, then reached for his radio. "Sir, I think you need to see this," he said quietly into the device. Within minutes, another vehicle arrived at the airfield. A woman in a dark suit emerged, her identification badge marking her as a senior member of the Royal Household Security Team. She walked briskly to the table where Tom's belongings were spread out and picked up the documents the guard had been examining. Tom's patience was wearing thin. "Look, those are completely legitimate business documents. My lawyer prepared them last week. If there's a problem, call him." The woman didn't respond immediately. She was reading carefully, her lips pressed together in concentration. Finally, she looked up at Tom with an expression he couldn't quite read. Was it surprise? Concern? Suspicion? "Mr. Parker Bowles, these documents mention several overseas accounts and property holdings that weren't listed in your last financial disclosure to the palace." Tom felt his face flush. "I wasn't aware I needed to disclose my private business dealings to anyone. I'm not a working royal. I don't receive any public funding. My finances are my own business." "That may have been true before," the woman said carefully. "But since your mother became queen consort, there are different expectations and requirements, particularly regarding international business interests that could present conflicts of interest or security risks. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Tom had always valued his independence, his ability to operate outside the suffocating protocols of royal life. Now it seemed those protocols had found him anyway, reaching into every corner of his existence. The guard who had been searching the aircraft descended the stairs, carrying a small box. He approached the security officer and spoke in low tones, but Tom caught fragments of the conversation. Something about undeclared items and further investigation required. What items? Tom demanded, his voice rising. Everything on that plane is either standard equipment or belongs to the charter company. I didn't bring anything except what's in my bag. The guard opened the box to reveal several bottles of wine, each bearing elegant labels from a French vineyard. Tom recognized them immediately. They were samples sent to him by a winemaker he was considering featuring in his upcoming book. He had forgotten they were even on board. Those are wine samples for research, Tom explained. For my next book on European wine regions and food pairings. They were properly shipped to me with all the correct documentation. The security woman examined the bottles carefully, photographing each label with her phone. The concern, Mr. Parker Bowles, is that these bottles came from a vineyard owned by a foreign businessman who is currently under investigation by financial authorities in 3 countries. The palace has been monitoring his activities because of his attempts to gain access to royal family members. Tom felt as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. He had no idea about any investigation. The winemaker had seemed perfectly legitimate, enthusiastic about collaborating with a high-profile food critic. Now that innocent professional connection was being painted as something sinister. I had no knowledge of any investigation, Tom said firmly. I receive hundreds of samples and requests every month. I can't possibly vet the background of every person who wants to work with me. We understand that, the security woman replied, but this is precisely why these new protocols exist. Your visibility and connection to the Queen Consort make you a target for people who want to exploit that relationship. Even unknowingly, you could become involved in something that damages the monarchy's reputation. Tom looked around at the guards, the scattered contents of his belongings, the aircraft that suddenly felt less like a convenience and more like a trap. He thought about calling his mother, but immediately dismissed the idea. Camilla had enough to deal with, navigating her new role as Queen Consort while facing constant scrutiny and criticism. The last thing she needed was her son creating another headline. So what happens now? Tom asked quietly. Am I free to go or am I under some kind of arrest? The security woman softened slightly. You're not under arrest, Mr. Parker Bowles, but we will need to complete this inspection and file a full report. Your flight will be delayed while we verify the contents of the aircraft and trace the origin of these wine bottles. We'll also need you to come to the palace tomorrow for a briefing on the new security protocols that apply to family members. Tom nodded slowly, feeling the weight of unwanted responsibility settling on his shoulders. He had spent his adult life carefully building a career separate from royal expectations. He was Tom Parker Bowles, food critic and television personality, not some prince with duties and protocols. But apparently that distinction no longer mattered. His mother's crown had reached out and touched him whether he wanted it to or not, and there was no escaping the shadows it cast over every aspect of his life. The inspection continued as Tom stood watching, wondering how this morning of routine travel had transformed into something that felt like a turning point, a moment when his carefully maintained independence began to crumble away. The following morning, Tom arrived at Buckingham Palace feeling like a student called to the headmaster's office. He had canceled his Paris appearance, dealt with angry producers, and spent a sleepless night wondering what other aspects of his life would now fall under palace scrutiny. The grand gates opened for him automatically, security already aware of his appointment. Inside, the palace felt different today, less like his mother's workplace and more like a fortress closing in around him. A palace aide met him in the entrance hall, a young woman with kind eyes but a professional demeanor that left no room for small talk. She led him through corridors he had walked dozens of times for family gatherings, but today they seemed longer. The portraits on the walls, watching him with judgment. They arrived at a conference room he had never seen before, tucked away in the administrative wing where working royals dealt with the machinery of monarchy. Inside, 3 people waited at a polished mahogany table. He recognized 2 of them from yesterday, the security woman who had examined his documents and the senior officer with the tablet. The third was an older man in an expensive suit, his silver hair and sharp eyes marking him as someone important. A leather briefcase sat on the table before him, and Tom noticed the royal crest embossed on its corner. Mr. Parker Bowles. "Thank you for coming," the silver-haired man said, gesturing to a chair across from them. "I'm Sir Malcolm Thornberry, Chief Security Advisor to Her Majesty. I apologize for the inconvenience yesterday, but I'm afraid the situation is more serious than a simple protocol briefing." Tom sat down slowly, his stomach tightening. "More serious? I thought this was about undisclosed business interests and some wine bottles from a questionable source." Sir Malcolm opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with documents and photographs. He spread several images across the table. Tom leaned forward, recognizing the French winemaker from his correspondence. But in these photos, the man was meeting with others Tom didn't know. The locations looked expensive, private yachts and exclusive restaurants. "Jean-Pierre Moreau," Sir Malcolm said, tapping one of the photos. "The winemaker who sent you those samples. He's not just under investigation for financial crimes. Intelligence services believe he's been operating as an intermediary for foreign interests, trying to gain influence with members of the royal family. Your connection to him, however innocent, has raised significant concerns." Tom felt heat rising in his face. "I exchanged maybe 3 emails with the man. He wanted me to visit his vineyard for a potential chapter in my book. That's all. There was nothing suspicious about it." "We believe you," the security woman from yesterday interjected. Her nameplate read Commander Patricia Walsh. "But Moreau is sophisticated. He targeted you specifically because of your mother's position. The samples he sent weren't just wine. Each bottle had a GPS tracker embedded in the cork." The room seemed to tilt. Tom gripped the edge of the table. "GPS trackers? Why would anyone put trackers in wine bottles?" Sir Malcolm leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. "To track your movements. To understand your patterns, your habits, where you go and when. You're not just Tom Parker Bowles, the food critic, anymore. You're a pathway to the Queen Consort and through her, to the King. People who want to exploit that connection will use any method available." Tom ran his hands through his hair, feeling the weight of this new reality crushing down on him. He thought of all the gifts he received, the invitations to restaurants and culinary events, the business proposals that arrived daily. How many of them were genuine? How many were attempts to manipulate him? "So what do I do?" Tom asked quietly. "Stop working entirely? Live in a bubble and never trust anyone?" "Nothing that extreme," Commander Walsh said, sliding a document across the table. "But we need you to agree to new security protocols. All gifts and samples must be screened before you accept them. Any international business dealings require prior security clearance. Your travel plans need to be shared with our team 48 hours in advance, and we'd like to assign you a security detail for public appearances." Tom stared at the document, seeing his freedom evaporating with each requirement. A security detail meant guards following him into restaurants, vetting his dinner companions, creating a spectacle wherever he went. His entire career was built on being accessible, relatable, the royal who chose a normal life. Now that carefully constructed image would shatter. "And if I refuse?" Tom said, though he already knew the answer. Sir Malcolm's expression remained neutral, but his voice carried an edge. "Then we cannot guarantee your safety or prevent future incidents that could embarrass the crown. Your mother's position is already delicate. Public trust in the monarchy depends on demonstrating that we take security seriously. If something were to happen to you because we failed to act on known threats, the consequences would be severe." The unspoken message was clear. Tom's resistance wouldn't just affect him. It would create problems for his mother, for the institution she now represented. He thought of Camilla, how hard she had worked to win public acceptance, the scrutiny she faced daily. Could he really add to her burdens by refusing reasonable security measures? "There's something else," the third man spoke for the first time. His nameplate identified him as Director James Pemberton. "We found more than just GPS trackers in those wine bottles. One contained a sophisticated listening device, inactive but ready to be remotely activated. If you had taken those bottles home, someone could have potentially listened to conversations in your residence." Tom felt sick. He lived alone, but his mother visited occasionally. Private family conversations, discussions about palace matters, all potentially compromised. "How long has this been going on? Are there other things I've received that were compromised?" "We're conducting a full sweep of your home and office as we speak," Commander Walsh said, "and reviewing all packages and gifts you've received in the past 6 months. We'll know more by tomorrow. Tom sat in stunned silence, processing the violation of his privacy, his life turned inside out by forces he never knew existed. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. He picked up the pen lying next to the security protocol document and stared at it, weighing his options one final time. If I sign this, Tom said slowly, does it mean I'll never have a normal life again? That everything I do will be monitored and controlled? Sir Malcolm softened slightly, a hint of sympathy crossing his features. It means we'll work together to keep you safe while allowing you to continue your career. The protocols sound restrictive, but they're designed to be as unobtrusive as possible. Many public figures live with similar arrangements. You'll adapt, and so will the people around you. Tom thought about the alternative, living in constant fear of unknown threats, wondering if every gift was a trap, every new contact a potential danger. At least with security protocols, he would have protection, expertise guiding him through this strange new reality. He thought of his mother again, remembered her strength in facing public criticism and personal attacks. If she could endure that, surely he could handle some security restrictions. With a deep breath, Tom signed the document, his signature binding him to a future he had never wanted but could no longer avoid. The palace had claimed him, just as it had claimed his mother years ago. The question now was whether he could learn to live within its constraints, while holding on to the person he had worked so hard to become. As Tom handed back the signed document, Sir Malcolm stood and extended his hand. Welcome to the family business, Mr. Parker Bowles. We'll do everything we can to make this transition smooth. Tom shook his hand, feeling the weight of that welcome like a chain settling around his shoulders. The family business. It sounded so benign, but he knew better now. The monarchy wasn't just titles and ceremonies. It was surveillance and sacrifice, protection and prison, all wrapped together in a package tied with ribbons of duty and responsibility. He had signed away his freedom to keep his family safe, and there was no turning back. 3 days after signing the security protocols, Tom stood in his home office watching 2 technicians in plain clothes systematically scan every surface with electronic devices. They had been working through his house since dawn, polite but thorough, turning his private sanctuary into a crime scene. So far, they had found 2 more listening devices, one hidden in a cookbook he received as a gift, and another embedded in a decorative wine opener from a Spanish culinary association. Commander Walsh stood beside him, making notes on her ever-present tablet. She had become his primary contact with palace security, checking in twice daily and coordinating the sweep of his life. Tom found her professional efficiency both reassuring and exhausting. Every conversation felt like a debrief, every question an interrogation. That's the last room, one technician said, holding up his scanner. We've covered the entire property. No active transmitters remaining. Good, Commander Walsh replied. Tag and bag the devices we found. The lab will want to trace their origin. She turned to Tom. 7 devices total. That's more than we expected. Someone has been watching you very carefully for at least 4 months. Tom felt violated in a way he couldn't quite articulate. His home had always been his refuge, the place where he could be himself without cameras or expectations. Now he knew that privacy had been an illusion, his conversations potentially monitored by strangers with unknown intentions. What were they listening for? What could I possibly know that's worth all this effort? You'd be surprised, Commander Walsh said. Intelligence gathering isn't always about state secrets. Sometimes it's about understanding relationships, predicting behavior, identifying vulnerabilities. Your casual conversations with your mother could reveal her state of mind, her concerns, her schedule. That information has value to the right buyer. The phone in Tom's pocket buzzed. He pulled it out and saw his mother's name on the screen. His finger hovered over the answer button, suddenly aware that even this call might be different now, filtered through new awareness of who might be listening. He glanced at Commander Walsh. You can answer it, she said. The house is clean now, and we've already secured your mobile phone. But remember the protocols we discussed. No specific details about security arrangements or palace locations. Tom accepted the call. Hello, Mum. Tom, darling, I've just heard about what happened. Why didn't you tell me immediately? Camilla's voice carried that particular blend of concern and irritation that only mothers could perfect. I had to learn from Malcolm that you'd been dealing with all this alone. I didn't want to worry you, Tom said, walking to the window and looking out at his garden, where more security personnel were installing new cameras. You have enough on your plate without my problems adding to the pile. Don't be ridiculous. You're my son. Your problems are my problems, security protocols or not. Her voice softened. Are you all right, really? Tom considered lying, offering some reassuring platitude about handling everything fine. But something about the violation of his privacy, the discovery that he'd been monitored for months, broke through his usual protective instincts. No, Mom, I'm not all right. My life has been turned upside down. Everything I thought I knew about my independence and privacy was apparently wrong. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Camilla spoke again, her voice carried the weight of experience. I know this is difficult. When I first joined this family, I struggled with the loss of privacy, the constant scrutiny, but you learn to adapt, to find moments of normalcy within the restrictions, and you're stronger than you think. Did anyone ever bug your house? Listen to your private conversations? Tom asked. Several times, actually, Camilla admitted. Journalists mostly in the early days. Once we found a telephoto lens pointed at my bedroom window from a building across the street. It's ghastly, but it does get easier. You stop thinking about it eventually, and the security measures become second nature. Tom wasn't sure he believed that, but hearing his mother's calm acceptance of such invasions somehow made his own situation feel less isolating. The security team wants to assign me a protection officer for public appearances. How am I supposed to maintain any credibility as a food critic with a bodyguard following me into restaurants? You make it part of your brand, Camilla said, a hint of humor entering her voice. The food critic with the mysterious companion. Your audience will adapt, and honestly, most people won't even notice after a while. You'd be amazed how invisible security can be when they're good at their job. Commander Walsh approached, pointing at her watch. Tom nodded, understanding. Mom, I need to go. Security briefing in 10 minutes, of course. But Tom, come to dinner this weekend. Just family, no protocols, no formality. We'll have a proper talk, and I can introduce you to some people who've navigated similar transitions. You're not alone in this. I'd like that, Tom said, surprised by how much he meant it. He ended the call and turned back to Commander Walsh. So what's this briefing about? We've traced the origin of those listening devices, she said, and the findings are more concerning than we anticipated. The devices weren't manufactured by any known intelligence service. They're custom-made, extremely sophisticated, and expensive. Whoever is behind this has significant resources and technical expertise. They moved to Tom's living room, where Sir Malcolm Thornberry had arrived, and set up a presentation on Tom's television screen. Images appeared showing technical specifications and circuit diagrams that meant nothing to Tom, but clearly impressed the security team. These devices are military-grade, Sir Malcolm explained. The kind of technology usually reserved for intelligence operations, not civilian surveillance. We've consulted with MI5, and they've never seen this particular model before. That suggests either a foreign intelligence service we haven't encountered, or a private security firm operating at a level that concerns us greatly. Why would a foreign intelligence service care about me? Tom asked, still struggling to understand why he warranted this level of attention. Because you're an access point, Director Pemberton said, joining them from the hallway where he'd been coordinating with his team. Foreign services don't always target the primary subject directly. They build networks around them, gathering intelligence from family members, friends, service providers. You see your mother regularly, attend family events, have conversations that reveal patterns and personalities. That intelligence, accumulated over time, creates a detailed picture of how the monarchy operates. Tom sank into his sofa, the magnitude of the situation finally hitting him. This wasn't just about keeping him safe or preventing embarrassment. He had become, without his knowledge or consent, a potential national security concern. His simple desire to live independently and build his own career had inadvertently created vulnerabilities that hostile actors could exploit. What happens now? Tom asked. Do I go into hiding? Stop seeing my mother? Give up my career? Nothing that drastic, Sir Malcolm assured him. But we do need to be more vigilant. Your new security detail starts tomorrow. We'll review all your upcoming commitments and travel plans. Any international trips will require additional precautions. And we need you to be alert to approaches from anyone new, especially people offering business opportunities or collaborations that seem too good to be true. Commander Walsh pulled up another image on the screen, a photo of a man Tom didn't recognize. This is Boris Volkov, a private intelligence contractor with ties to several foreign governments. We believe he's the one who orchestrated the surveillance operation against you. He specializes in what he calls social engineering, building relationships with targets to gather intelligence over time. The winemaker, Moreau, was working for Volkov? Tom asked. Moreau is one of several people Volkov has used to approach you. We're still identifying the others, but we believe there may be more individuals in your professional network who were compromised or recruited specifically to gain access to you. Tom thought about his colleagues, the restaurant owners he worked with, the producers and publishers who helped build his career. How many of those relationships were genuine? How many were manipulation? The paranoia that thought created was almost worse than the surveillance itself. I need a drink, Tom muttered, standing up and heading toward his kitchen. But even that simple act now felt complicated. Which bottles in his collection were safe? Which had come from sources that might be compromised? Commander Walsh followed him, her expression sympathetic. I know this is overwhelming, but you're doing the right thing by cooperating with us. We'll get through this together and eventually you'll find a new normal. It won't be the life you had before, but it can still be a good life. A meaningful one. Tom poured himself a glass of whiskey from a bottle he'd bought himself years ago, one of the few things in his house he could still trust completely. He raised it in a silent toast to his lost privacy and drank deeply, feeling the burn, hoping it might somehow wash away the feeling that his life would never be entirely his own again. 2 weeks had passed since Tom's life changed forever. He sat in a trendy London restaurant, supposedly reviewing their new autumn menu, but his attention kept drifting to the man sitting 2 tables away. Detective Sergeant Marcus Webb, his new protection officer, had dressed in civilian clothes and carried himself like just another diner, but Tom couldn't stop being aware of his presence. Every instinct screamed that everyone in the restaurant must know, must see the subtle way Webb scanned the room, the strategic position he'd chosen near the exits. The head chef, a young woman named Sophie Chen, whom Tom had known for 3 years, approached his table with her signature dish. The duck confit with cherry reduction, she said, setting down the plate with obvious pride. What do you think? Be brutal, I can take it. Tom forced himself to focus, cutting into the perfectly cooked duck and tasting it properly. The flavors were exceptional, the kind of refined technique that came from years of practice and genuine talent. But as he prepared to compliment her work, he found himself wondering about Sophie's background, her connections, whether their friendship had been real or manufactured by someone like Boris Volkov. It's perfect, Tom said, and he meant it. The reduction has just the right balance of sweet and tart. Your technique has really evolved. Sophie beamed, but then her expression shifted to concern. Tom, is everything all right? You seem distracted tonight. And who's that man who came in with you? You've never brought anyone to these tastings before. Tom had prepared for this question, rehearsed the answer with Commander Walsh's help. Just a friend. He's interested in the restaurant business. Wanted to observe a professional review. The lie tasted worse than any bad meal he'd ever critiqued. Sophie didn't look convinced, but professional courtesy prevented her from pushing further. She returned to the kitchen, leaving Tom alone with his thoughts and his carefully observed plate. His phone buzzed with a message from Webb. The message was brief and coded, a system they'd developed. Everything clear, no concerns. Tom pocketed his phone and continued his meal, but the food had lost its appeal. How could he write honest reviews when every interaction now felt tainted by suspicion and security concerns? After finishing the tasting menu and making his notes, Tom prepared to leave. Webb stood smoothly, timing his exit to appear coincidental. They met outside, where Tom's driver waited with the car that had replaced his beloved but insufficiently secure personal vehicle. The new car had bulletproof glass and reinforced doors, turning every journey into a reminder of the threats that supposedly justified such precautions. That went well, Webb said as they drove through London's evening traffic. The chef didn't seem suspicious about my presence. She's known me for 3 years, Tom replied. She absolutely noticed something was different. I'm going to have to tell her something eventually, or she'll think I don't trust her. The official line is that you've received some threats and palace security recommended precautions. It's vague enough to explain my presence without revealing operational details. Webb checked his phone, his expression shifting. We have a situation. Commander Walsh wants us to divert to the palace immediately. Tom's stomach dropped. What kind of situation? She didn't specify, but it's urgent. Webb gave instructions to the driver, and the car changed course, heading toward Buckingham Palace. 20 minutes later, Tom found himself back in the conference room where he'd signed the security protocols. Commander Walsh was there along with Sir Malcolm and two people Tom didn't recognize. Their expressions were grave, and a laptop on the table displayed what looked like financial records. "Mr. Parker Bowles, thank you for coming quickly," Sir Malcolm said. "We've had a breakthrough in the investigation, but it's brought some disturbing information to light." Commander Walsh gestured to the laptop. "We've been tracing the money behind Boris Volkov's operation. The surveillance equipment, the recruitment of assets like Jean-Pierre Moreau, all of it cost significant money. We needed to know who was funding this level of intelligence gathering against you." "And?" Tom prompted, dreading the answer. One of the strangers, a man in his 50s with the bearing of a career intelligence officer, spoke up. "The funding traces back to a consortium of media organizations and private intelligence firms. They weren't gathering intelligence for a foreign government. They were gathering it to sell to the highest bidder, primarily tabloid newspapers and gossip magazines." Tom felt his anger rising. "Are you telling me that journalists put listening devices in my home? That all this was for gossip stories?" "Not journalists directly," Commander Walsh clarified, "but media organizations that paid private contractors to gather information about the royal family. Your connection to the Queen Consort made you a valuable target. Any details about her private life? Her relationships with family members, her opinions on palace matters, all of that has commercial value in the tabloid market." Sir Malcolm's expression was cold with fury. "We've identified 3 major publications that purchased information from Volkov's network. They're all claiming they had no knowledge of illegal surveillance methods, that they believed the information came from legitimate sources and contacts." "Do you believe them?" Tom asked. "No," the intelligence officer said flatly. "The sophistication of the operation, the specific targeting, the amount of money involved, all of it suggests the publications knew exactly what they were paying for. They maintained plausible deniability by using contractors as intermediaries, but make no mistake, they knew they were buying illegally obtained intelligence." Tom walked to the window, looking out at the palace grounds. Somewhere beyond those walls were the newspapers and websites that had turned his life into a commodity, that had violated his privacy, not for national security, but for profit and entertainment. The betrayal felt worse than if it had been a foreign intelligence service. At least that would have had purpose beyond simple greed. "What happens now?" Tom asked. "Can we prosecute them? Hold them accountable?" "That's complicated," Sir Malcolm admitted. "Proving that the publications knowingly purchased illegally obtained information requires evidence that's difficult to obtain. The contractors have vanished, probably warned by their employers. Volkov himself has left the country and is beyond our jurisdiction. We can pursue civil action, but criminal prosecutions will be challenging. So they get away with it," Tom said bitterly. "They invade my life, compromise my safety, and face no real consequences." "Not entirely," Commander Walsh said. "We're coordinating with the Media Regulatory Authority to pursue sanctions and potentially revoke press credentials. We're also preparing a public statement that will expose the scope of the illegal surveillance. The court of public opinion can be as powerful as any criminal prosecution." The other stranger, a woman who had remained silent until now, spoke. "Mr. Parker Bowles, I'm Jennifer Hartford from the Palace Communications Office. We believe it's time to go public with what happened to you. Not with all the operational details, but enough to show the extent to which the media has violated royal family privacy. Your story could help change the conversation about press regulation and privacy rights." Tom turned from the window, considering the proposal. Going public meant admitting vulnerability, acknowledging that his carefully maintained independence had been an illusion. But it also meant fighting back, refusing to let the violation stand unchallenged. His mother had faced worse scrutiny and emerged stronger. Perhaps he could do the same. "What would going public involve?" Tom asked. "A controlled interview, possibly with the BBC," Jennifer explained. "You'd discuss the surveillance, the impact on your life, the broader issues of privacy and media ethics. We'd prepare talking points, ensure you're comfortable with every element. This would be your story, told your way." Tom thought about his audience, the people who followed his work because they appreciated honest food criticism and accessible culinary knowledge. They deserved to know why his approach might change, why security concerns now influenced his public appearances. More importantly, they deserved to understand the real cost of tabloid culture, the human impact of treating privacy as a commodity to be bought and sold. "I'll do it," Tom said, "but on my terms. I choose the interviewer, I approve the questions in advance, and I decide what details to share. This isn't a palace publicity stunt. It's my story, and I'll tell it my way." Sir Malcolm and Jennifer exchanged glances, then nodded. "Agreed," Sir Malcolm said. "We'll support you however you need." This interview could be the first step in holding the media accountable and protecting others from similar violations. As the meeting concluded and Tom prepared to leave, Commander Walsh pulled him aside. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Speaking out takes courage, especially when you know the media will try to twist your words and create new controversies. But silence only protects the perpetrators." Tom appreciated her words, though he couldn't quite feel the courage she attributed to him. He felt angry and violated, determined to fight back but uncertain of the outcome. The interview would expose him to new scrutiny, new criticism, new invasions. But perhaps that was the price of refusing to be a victim, of transforming trauma into testimony. Driving home through London's darkening streets, Tom watched the city pass by and thought. The BBC studio felt colder than Tom expected, or perhaps that was just his nervousness manifesting as physical sensation. He sat in a chair positioned across from veteran journalist Sarah Montague, whose reputation for fair but probing interviews had made her Tom's choice for this difficult conversation. Cameras surrounded them, microphones clipped to their clothing, lighting adjusted to eliminate shadows while somehow making everything feel more exposed. "Are you ready?" Sarah asked, her voice kind but professional. "Remember, we can stop at any time if you need a break." Tom nodded, though ready felt like the wrong word. He would never be ready to discuss the violation of his privacy on national television, but delay wouldn't make it easier. "Let's begin." The red recording light illuminated and Sarah transformed into her professional persona. "Tom Parker Bowles, thank you for speaking with us today about a situation that has raised serious questions about media ethics and royal family privacy. Can you tell us what happened 2 weeks ago at a private airfield outside London?" Tom took a breath, centering himself. "I arrived for what I thought would be a routine private flight to Paris. Instead, I was met by royal guards who informed me they needed to conduct a security inspection of my aircraft and luggage. At first, I was confused and somewhat annoyed. I've flown private dozens of times without incident. But as the inspection proceeded, they discovered items that changed everything." "What kind of items?" Sarah prompted. "Surveillance devices," Tom said, the words still difficult to speak aloud. "GPS trackers hidden in wine bottles that had been sent to me as professional samples. Later, during a sweep of my home, security teams found listening devices in gifts I'd received, in items from professional contacts. 7 devices in total, all military-grade technology designed to monitor my movements and record my conversations." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "Who was responsible for this surveillance?" "A private intelligence contractor named Boris Volkov, who specializes in what he calls social engineering. He recruited people in my professional network to gain access to me, to monitor my life and gather intelligence about my family. But Volkov wasn't working for a foreign government or traditional espionage operation. He was gathering information to sell to British media organizations, primarily tabloid newspapers." The revelation hung in the air. Sarah's expression showed genuine shock, though she must have known this from the pre-interview briefing. "You're saying British newspapers paid for illegally obtained surveillance of you and your family?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Tom replied, his anger giving strength to his words. "They claim they didn't know the information came from illegal surveillance, that they believed it was from legitimate sources. But the sophistication of the operation, the amount of money involved, makes that claim difficult to believe. They paid for access to my private life, and they didn't ask questions about how that access was obtained." "How has this affected you personally?" Sarah asked. Tom paused, gathering his thoughts. This was the vulnerable part, the admission that would either generate sympathy or mockery depending on the audience. "It's destroyed my sense of security and privacy. My home, which should be my refuge, was compromised for months. Conversations I had with my mother, with friends, with colleagues, all potentially recorded and analyzed. I find myself questioning relationships, wondering which of my professional contacts were genuine and which were recruited to spy on me. The paranoia is exhausting. Tom continued. I used to love receiving samples from winemakers, gifts from culinary associations, invitations to collaborate on projects. Now each one arrives with suspicion attached. Is this genuine professional interest or another attempt to access me and through me, my mother? That loss of trust, that constant vigilance, it fundamentally changes how you move through the world. Sarah nodded sympathetically. You've now accepted palace security protocols that include a protection officer accompanying you to public events. How is that affecting your work as a food critic? It's complicated, Tom admitted. My career has always been built on accessibility, on being a regular person who happens to know a lot about food. Arriving at restaurants with a security detail changes that dynamic. Chefs I've known for years suddenly treat me differently, more carefully. The spontaneity that makes my work authentic becomes harder to maintain when every movement requires security coordination. But I'm adapting, he added. My protection officer, Marcus, has been remarkably discreet. We're developing systems that allow me to continue my work while maintaining necessary precautions. It's not the life I chose, but it's the life I've inherited by being my mother's son. Sarah shifted in her chair, preparing for a more difficult question. Tom recognized the subtle change in her posture. Some critics might say that as the son of the queen consort, you should expect reduced privacy. That public interest in the royal family justifies aggressive journalism. How would you respond to that? Tom had anticipated this question, discussed it extensively with Jennifer Hartford from Palace Communications. His answer needed to be firm without seeming entitled. There's a vast difference between legitimate journalism and illegal surveillance. Public interest doesn't justify breaking the law, doesn't justify placing tracking devices in someone's home, or recording private conversations without consent. If we accept that logic, then we're saying some people deserve no privacy at all simply because of who their parents are. I'm not a working royal, Tom emphasized. I receive no public funding. I've built my own career through my own efforts. Yes, my mother is queen consort, and that creates certain responsibilities and vulnerabilities. But it shouldn't mean surrendering every aspect of my private life to media scrutiny, especially not through illegal means. What do you hope comes from speaking out about this? Sarah asked. I hope it starts a conversation about media ethics and accountability, Tom said. The press has enormous power, but with that power should come responsibility and respect for basic legal boundaries. If media organizations can pay for illegal surveillance without facing real consequences, then no one is truly safe from that kind of violation. Not royals, not celebrities, not ordinary citizens who happen to become interesting to journalists. I also want people to understand the human cost of tabloid culture, Tom continued. Every headline about the royal family comes from somewhere, and increasingly it comes from invasive methods that treat people as commodities rather than human beings. My story is extreme, but the underlying principle applies broadly. We need better regulations, better enforcement, and a cultural shift in how we think about privacy and press freedom. Sarah consulted her notes. The palace has indicated they're pursuing both civil action against the media organizations involved and regulatory sanctions. Do you believe that's sufficient? I believe it's a start, Tom replied carefully. Criminal prosecutions are difficult because of how these operations are structured, with layers of contractors creating plausible deniability for the actual publications. But civil action can be costly and damaging to reputations. Regulatory sanctions can restrict press access and credentials. Combined with public awareness and pressure, these measures might create enough consequences to deter similar behavior in the future. Or they might not, Tom added with a touch of cynicism. The financial incentives for scandal and gossip are enormous. As long as there's a market for illegally obtained royal family information, someone will find ways to supply it. But we have to draw lines and enforce them, or accept that privacy is simply extinct for anyone connected to public life. Sarah looked directly at the camera, then back to Tom. One final question. Has this experience changed your relationship with your mother and your view of royal life? Tom considered the question seriously. It's made me understand her life in ways I never fully grasped before. My mother has lived with this level of scrutiny and intrusion for decades. She's handled it with grace and resilience that I'm only beginning to appreciate. Watching her navigate the complexities of royal life while maintaining her humanity and sense of humor has given me a model for how to survive this. As for my view of royal life, Tom paused, searching for honest words. I've always valued my independence, my separation from palace protocols and responsibilities. That distance felt like freedom. Now I understand it was always somewhat illusory. I am my mother's son, and that connection brings both blessings and burdens. The challenge is learning to accept the burdens without losing the parts of myself that matter most, the work I love, and the authenticity that defines my career. Sarah smiled, a genuine expression of warmth. Tom Parker Bowles, thank you for your candor and courage in discussing this difficult experience. I hope it leads to the changes you're seeking. The camera stopped recording and Tom felt the tension drain from his shoulders. He had done it, shared his story on his terms, spoken truth to power in whatever small way that might matter. Jennifer Hartford approached from the production booth, her expression pleased. That was perfect, Jennifer said. Honest, measured, powerful without being angry. It will air tomorrow evening, prime time. We're expecting significant response. Tom nodded, suddenly exhausted. What kind of response? Mixed inevitably, Jennifer admitted. Some will sympathize. The interview aired on a Thursday evening, and by Friday morning Tom's life had transformed again. His phone buzzed continuously with messages from journalists requesting follow-up interviews, from colleagues expressing support or curiosity, from organizations inviting him to speak about privacy rights and media ethics. The BBC received record viewing numbers, and social media exploded with debates about royal privacy, press freedom, and the boundaries of legitimate journalism. Tom sat in his home office, now certified as surveillance-free by the most advanced security sweeps available, reading through the responses. The reactions split predictably along existing fault lines. Royal supporters praised his courage and condemned the media organizations involved. Critics accused him of seeking sympathy while living a privileged life. Media commentators debated whether his revelations would lead to meaningful reform or simply another round of empty promises. But there were unexpected voices, too. Other public figures, celebrities, and politicians who had experienced similar invasions began sharing their own stories. A prominent actress revealed she had found tracking devices in gifts from supposed fans. A government minister admitted his home had been bugged by journalists trying to uncover political scandals. Tom's story had opened a floodgate, giving others permission to speak about violations they had previously suffered in silence. Commander Walsh arrived mid-morning with Sir Malcolm Thornberry. They looked tired but satisfied, carrying folders full of documents and updates. Tom poured them coffee, a small gesture of normalcy in what had become an extraordinary situation. The response has exceeded our expectations, Sir Malcolm said, settling into a chair. 3 of the media organizations named in your interview have issued statements. 2 are apologizing and promising internal investigations. The 3rd is denying everything and threatening legal action against us for defamation. Let them sue, Tom said with more confidence than he felt. We have the evidence. We have the devices themselves, the financial records, testimony from people Volkov recruited. If they want to make this a legal battle, we're prepared. Commander Walsh smiled. That's the spirit. But there's more interesting news. The regulatory authority has announced a special investigation into surveillance practices by media organizations. They're using your case as a catalyst to examine industry-wide practices. Parliamentary committees are calling for hearings. This could lead to real legislative changes. Tom felt a spark of hope. Real changes? Not just symbolic gestures? Potentially, Sir Malcolm said carefully. The political will seems genuine this time. Your interview humanized the issue in ways that abstract privacy debates never could. People saw you as a real person who suffered real violation, not just another privileged royal complaining about press attention. That emotional connection matters in driving policy change. There's something else, Commander Walsh added. We've arrested 2 people connected to the Volkov network. Mid-level operatives who were willing to cooperate in exchange for reduced charges. Their testimony confirms the media organizations knew they were purchasing illegally obtained information. It strengthens our civil case significantly and may support criminal charges after all. Tom absorbed this news, feeling vindication mixed with sadness. Arrests and prosecutions meant justice, but they couldn't undo the months of invasion. couldn't restore his innocent assumption that his private life was actually private. Still, accountability mattered. It sent a message that such violations carried consequences. His phone buzzed with a call from his mother. Tom excused himself and answered. "Hello, Mum. Tom, darling, have you seen the news? They're talking about your interview everywhere. I've had calls from other family members asking how you're holding up. Even your stepfather was impressed by how you handled yourself." Camilla's voice carried pride and relief. "I'm managing," Tom said. "The response is overwhelming, but so far mostly positive. We may actually achieve something meaningful from all this." "You already have," Camilla insisted. "You've shown courage in facing something terrifying and speaking truth about it publicly. That matters more than any policy changes, though I hope those come too. You've made me incredibly proud, and I know this wasn't easy." Tom felt emotion welling up, the accumulated stress and fear of recent weeks finally finding release. "It changed everything, Mum. My sense of security, my trust in people, my ability to work independently. Sometimes I wonder if I can ever get back to who I was before all this started." "You can't go back," Camilla said gently. "Trauma changes us, and pretending otherwise only delays healing. But you can move forward, can build a new version of yourself that incorporates these experiences without being defined by them. I've done it several times, and so can you. You're stronger than you know." They talked for another 20 minutes, mother and son sharing the kind of honest conversation that had always been their foundation. Tom drew strength from her experience, her resilience in facing decades of media scrutiny and personal attacks. If she could survive and thrive in this world, surely he could learn to do the same. After ending the call, Tom returned to Sir Malcolm and Commander Walsh. They had been reviewing documents, planning next steps in the various legal and regulatory proceedings. Tom rejoined them, feeling more centered than he had in weeks. "I have a question," Tom said. "What happens to my career now? Can I continue as a food critic with all these security restrictions? Will restaurants still want me to review them if I arrive with protection officers and security protocols?" Commander Walsh considered the question seriously. "Your career will evolve, but it doesn't have to end. Many public figures work successfully with security arrangements. We can develop protocols that minimize disruption while maintaining necessary protection. The key is finding the right balance and being transparent with your professional contacts about the new requirements." "Some restaurants may decline," Sir Malcolm added honestly. "Some colleagues may find the security presence uncomfortable, but others will understand and accommodate. Your interview has created sympathy and awareness that will make these conversations easier. People know now that these restrictions aren't about pretension or demanding special treatment. They're about safety and preventing future violations." Tom nodded slowly. "So I adapt and continue, but differently. Accept that my independence was always constrained by my family connections, even when I pretended otherwise." "Exactly," Commander Walsh confirmed. "And there might be opportunities too. Your platform has grown significantly since the interview. You could use that visibility to advocate for privacy rights, to educate people about food and culture in new ways. Crisis can become opportunity if you're creative about it." Over the following weeks, Tom began rebuilding his professional life within the new parameters. He had honest conversations with restaurant owners and producers about his security requirements. Some relationships ended, unable to accommodate the changes, but many more adapted, finding ways to work with the restrictions while preserving the authenticity Tom valued. He also received invitations to speak at conferences about privacy and media ethics, to consult on proposed legislation strengthening protections against surveillance. His expertise was no longer limited to food criticism. He had become, somewhat reluctantly, an advocate and voice for people whose privacy had been violated by aggressive media practices. Marcus Webb, his protection officer, became less of an intrusion and more of a colleague. They developed shorthand communication and genuine respect. Marcus had a dry sense of humor that helped diffuse tense situations, and his presence gradually felt less like surveillance and more like partnership. 3 months after the airfield incident that changed everything, Tom sat in a Michelin-starred restaurant preparing to review their new tasting menu. Marcus sat at a nearby table, barely noticeable to other diners. The chef, aware of Tom's situation and sympathetic to his challenges, had accommodated the security requirements without complaint. As Tom tasted the first course, a delicate preparation of locally sourced vegetables that spoke to both tradition and innovation, he realized something had shifted. The food still mattered, His ability to analyze and appreciate culinary artistry remained intact. The security measures, the constant awareness of potential threats, had become background noise rather than defining features of his existence. He would never have chosen this path, would never have wanted the violation that forced these changes. But sitting there, tasting food that represented someone's passion and creativity, Tom understood that he could still do meaningful work. He could still contribute his knowledge and expertise to the world. The form had changed, the context had shifted, but the core remained. Later that evening, after filing his review and returning home, Tom stood at his window looking out at the city lights. His phone showed messages of support, updates on the legal proceedings, invitations to new opportunities. The life stretching before him looked different from what he had planned, shaped by circumstances he never anticipated. But it was still his life, still filled with possibility and purpose. The violation had changed him, but it had not broken him. He had spoken his truth, fought for accountability, and emerged with new understanding of both his vulnerabilities and his strengths. The family business, sir,